Very good morning, friends. It is my pleasure to welcome you all for this third day, first session of their faculty development program on robotics welding and welding automation. Really, I welcome on behalf of Department of Robotics and Automation Engineering and the Center of Excellence in Welding Engineering and Technology, our chief guest, especially the guest speaker, commonly known as Primo Rajagopal. He is the MD of that. He's a very well-known expert. Really, I'm very happy to. It's a great privilege to have him here. He has accepted us, and he has done the main, especially on automation, building automation. Lot of equipment systems he has developed. I am very happy to introduce him. Just I will share the slides for him. Okay, to introduce Mr. Rajagopal. I think it takes little time, please. Okay, I'm just sharing the PPT. All right. So he is a graduate electrical and electronics engineering from IIT Madras and worked as maintenance engineer in L&T for 9 years. And he is now presently the managing director of Primo Automation System, which he has promoted 25 years ago, along with his colleague, Mr. Balasubramanian. He is also IIT Madras product. Both of them, they have joined and together they have developed a lot of systems here. They have over 1,000 welding automation systems installed in India and 8 other countries. A very creative engineer and expert in innovative design and development of various automation systems, deploying PLC, CNCs, and robots. So installed dozens of India's first-time welding automation systems for the business segments of thermal energy, wind energy, defense, space, steel building fabrication, railway bridge fabrications, and more. An expert in deploying advanced welding processes, experience in designing and executing turnkey and mega plant automations for industries, a good integrator of welding and materials handling automation. So really, we are very fortunate to have him because he has that much experience in welding industry and especially automation industries. Really, we are fortunate to have him, and he has ready to he has accepted to share his experience. So now I hand over the session to Mr. Rajagopal, sir. Please, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Murugan. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for investing your time. I will present you about our experiences on robotic welding automation as well as on Industry 4.0, which is the subject line today. I will start sharing my screen now. Gentlemen, Primo is the company that I started along with my colleague Balasubramanian 25 years ago. And this financial year is our silver jubilee year. Our current discussion here is limited to robotic welding automation and Industry 4.0, though we also do many other non-robotic welding systems. The basic objective of robotic welding systems is to replicate the functions of a welder's arm and a welder's wrist. I have used the word basic in red color because as we go down the presentation, we will find that there are more objectives which are getting fulfilled. But this is a very basic objective where the functions of a welder's arm and a welder's wrist are duplicated by the robotic arm. The current day robots which has evolved over the years is of 6 axis in configuration, and the simultaneous functioning of one or more of these axes is what is helping us to replicate the welder's wrist action. A robotic welding work cell can be of various configurations. In fact, the only limit is one's creativity and innovation. However, to share some of these configurations, I am listing out a few of them here. I have listed about 7 configurations. The first one is a stationary robot. The part doesn't move. Only the robot moves and does the welding inside a work cell. All of these are presented with appropriate pictures in the upcoming slides. So let us go to them and discuss there. So this is the stationary robot. It is welding on a stationary component. This can be considered to be the simplest of robotic welding automation work cells or configurations. The second configuration is one where you have a stationary robot, but the part is manipulated in one axis. We call it as a head and tailstock manipulator. While the robot is stationary, but articulated in its 6 axis. The third category or third configuration of utilizing the robots in an automated welding work cell is the same as the previous one, but here we have got 2 part manipulators. Both of them are single axis manipulators. You are seeing one in the foreground and one in the behind the robot. The purpose of such a configuration is to mask the manual activities of loading the part, unloading the part, clamping the part. All those activities do not add to your cycle time. You can improve your productivity by having this configuration. The robot, I said, has got 6 axes, and the 2 manipulators have got an axis each. So this becomes an 8 axis work cell. Where the envelope of the component or the part is very large, we start using what we call as robot sliders, and the robots by themselves have got a certain work envelope. If you put them on a slider, that work envelope gets enlarged to the extent of the length of the slider. This is one of the essential requirement of a robotic welding automation, where the part dimensions are large. Another kind of robotic work cell configuration is to have a robot and manipulate the part in 2 axes. The picture that you are seeing is the part of a center frame of an excavator. It's a very highly load-bearing part. The welds are very critical welds. The rotation of this part and tilting of the part are both done by the manipulator. Here you are seeing another configuration where there are 2 part manipulators, but each part manipulator is a 2 axis manipulator. You are seeing the robot in the front. After the robot, you are seeing 2 work cells carrying 2 truck wheels, and the wheels can be rotated in the respective manipulator, and they can also be tilted. So each manipulator has got 2 axes. So 2 manipulators will have 2 plus 2, 4 axes. Along with the 6 axes of the robot, this would be a 10 axis work cell. The last one under the configurations is multiple robots serving multiple manipulators in a common work area. There are no limitations to the number of robots that can work inside the single work cell. And this would be a very higher level of automation. I previously said that the robots are developed to basically replicate the welder's arm and wrist. But as the robots evolve, we are also trying to do the job of a welder's brain. The current day robots are equipped with functions that help the robots to perform a little more than just the wrist function. It also does certain processing, what we call as the welder's brain also. For example, a welder looks at the joint, he starts welding, and as the welding progresses, he makes course corrections depending upon the way the joint progresses. His eyes are seeing the joint, his hands are doing the course correction, and his brains are doing the processing of connecting the eyes to the hands. These functions are also now enabled in the robots. That is why I use the word that they can also nowadays, to some extent, you can never replace the welder's skills in its entirety. To some extent, the welder's brain also. Let us see a few examples of how this function is done. A situation where the robot is programmed to start welding at a particular coordinate. But we are not very sure that the job is going to be exactly there. That is, the weld start point is not going to be exactly there. It could be, away by a few millimeter. But we want to start at the right place. I'll show you how the robot detects the starting edge of a component in this video. This square block is being scanned by a laser sensor integrated to the robot. The robotic torch comes and stops exactly at the corner, and then it continues to track the edge. Now you will see the part being disturbed in position, and you can see how the robot tracks again the start point. Yes, you see that the robot has come and stopped exactly at the start point even when the part was disturbed in its position. It then continues to track the edge and stops exactly at the end. So this is basically to demonstrate the operations of a function called start point detection, which enables the robot to understand the start and the end points. This is used when the welding is actually a straight line, but your start and end points could be varying. So the robot detects the start point, detects the end point, and does the welding automatically. In the same direction of replicating the welder's brain, let us look at a second situation wherein the robot starts welding, but the actual joint is not in the programmed path. The programmed path and the actual joint are differing. It could be the variations in the component or the variations in the fit up. The robot has got a function called through the arc seam tracking, where while welding, it will understand the root of the weld and track it. Let us have an idea of the same through this video. You are seeing the joint here in this picture. This is the joint where the welding has to happen, and you will now find the programmed path of the robot is completely deviated from that. You can see the amount of deviation. This is where the joint should have been, but this is where the joint actually is. It could be an error in teaching. That is why it is written as a poorly taught path, or it could be an error on the part fitment. Now, once you start welding, the robot, through the welding parameters, continuously does the course correction and will weld exactly on the joint. The torch is weaving across the weld joint. Now you see that the fillet is exactly at the root. Actually, it should have gone like this. This is how the robot does the course correction. It picks up the welding parameters as it does the weaving at the left and the right end of the weavings, and continuously processes those data to average them out. You will see a second weld now, which will also happen exactly at the root. you can find that the weld has happened exactly at the root. It has not deviated. This is one of the tools or functions in the robot called through the arc seam tracking or arc sensor. Different robots have got different names for it. This also is a tool that helps us to replicate the welder's brain to some extent. Now, let us look at a situation that the robot is not going to be programmed. Whatever the joint profile is, the robot is expected to track it. Previously, what we saw was a situation that we have a programmed path, we have an actual path, and there is a deviation. We are going one step higher in this. I don't have a programmed path. I have a profile, and the robot has to see the profile and track it. You can see how this is being done. Here we use laser sensors. In the previous one, we did not have a laser sensor. The robot itself had some functions built into it, but this is a more demanding requirement. You can see the weld joint here. It is in a profile. The bottom plate is a rectangular plate. The top one is a laser cut part, and the welding has to happen between these two parts. This laser scanner, which is leading the welding torch in the robotic arm, continuously processes the weld joint dimensional coordinates, sends them to the robot, and the robot continuously makes course corrections dynamically as it travels. Now you will see that happening. Just watch the robot arm turning its wrist and continuously tracking the edge. These are the intelligent functions that are getting built into the robot, and it's a continuous evolution process. This is not pre-programmed. This is not pre-taught. On the fly, dynamically, this is being tracked. So these are some of the functions where the robots not only replicate the wrist or arm of a welder, but it also does the functions of a welder's brain to some extent. Now let's look at a few robotic system images which we have built in the last few years. And after seeing them, we can also look at the videos of some of them. What you are seeing here in our factory is a robotic welding work cell. It's a pretty large work cell. There are two manipulators here, one on the left and one on the right. Both are single axis manipulators. We call them head and tail stalks. The part is called a center section. This is the part to be welded, the steel part. You are seeing one more here. There are two robots here. This is the 7th configurations that I had shown in the previous slide, where you have got multiple robots working on multiple manipulators. Both the robots will travel along the length of this axis. Both of them would simultaneously weld on this part, while the operator is loading and unloading the other part in the second manipulator. This would give us huge advantages in terms of productivity by eliminating what we call as the non-arcing time. In welding, you have got arcing time and non-arcing time. Even though non-arcing time is an essential requirement, it is not a productive activity. So this configuration helps us to mask the non-arcing activities, thereby giving a very, very high arc factor or arc percentage. Arc factor is the percentage of the time that we are arcing on the work cell. If the robots and the welding machines are idle, then we are not producing out of the work cell, even though we may be working on it. This kind of a configuration would have an arc factor of as high as 70%, which is not a practical possibility in a manual welding environment. This is another component. Here also you see a robot serving two manipulators. Both are what we call as L-type positioners or skyhook positioners. Both the manipulators can rotate the parts, both the manipulators can tilt the parts, and the robot works between these two manipulators. Here also the non-arcing, that is the non-productive time, is masked. This is the same configuration, it's the same part like the previous picture, but here we have got two robots doing the job. These decisions are taken based on the output that we require in a shift of 8 hours. In the previous work cell, the customer wanted a certain output per shift, and this work cell, the same customer wanted a very large output. So we have got two robots serving two manipulators, and each robot is on the respective sliders. If you try the number of axes in this particular configuration, each robot has got 6 and 6 axes, that makes it 12. And each robot has got a sliding axis, that makes it 14. And each manipulator has got 2 axes for rotation and tilting, that makes it 4. It's an 18 axis robotic work cell. Very highly automated working environment with the very high levels of productivity. This is a single robot with the 2 stations, one at the front and one at the rear. This also helps in eliminating the non-arcing activities. You will also see that there are 2 tanks placed in one fixture. So after welding this, the robot would be welding on the second tank. Such decisions on whether to put one part or 2 parts are taken based on the amount of welding involved in a particular component as compared to the amount of time required for loading, unloading, and clamping them. Accordingly, we work out. The whole objective is to see that the robot keeps arcing as long as possible. This is the same equipment. Now, when you have very large components, you mount the robot on a gantry. These are gantry mounted robots. Now, what you really get is that the robots have a very long travel. In this particular case, it was a 32-meter travel. And the robot has got its own envelope between the 2 legs. We also do configurations where this robot, here it is stationary, it will be moving in this direction. So if you are looking at a welding bay, this particular robotic gantry can travel anywhere and perform the welding. It can be the same long component or it can be multiple different components. This is another example of one robot serving 2 manipulators. And here also we are giving provisions for putting 1 bucket here and 1 more bucket here. This part is actually a bucket. After welding these 2 buckets, the robot would turn and weld on the other side. Robots are also used in large, heavy fabrication areas. In fact, we specialize in them, and not just the sheet metal stuff or the light ones. What you are seeing here is a head and tail stock for doing hard facing on an extruder screw. It's a very large screw weighing heavily, and the robot would perform welding continuously for hours together on one screw once it is started. This is a work cell where you have got 2 robots. This is one robotic arm, this is another robotic arm. They serve 2 stations, one at the front and one at the rear, but each of the station is also a press. You are seeing some hydraulics here. They are horizontal presses. We are actually doing welding on propeller shafts of trucks. A propeller shaft is a 3-piece assembly. The machine does pressing at a hydraulic tonnage between 10 to 20 tons, and then the robot does the welding. In this particular case, the robots are also fitted with laser scanners to understand the position of the weld and perform the welding. This is another configuration. In the starting of the presentation, I said that the only limit to robotic cell configuration is the creativity and innovation. Here we have got the part. The front station is the assembly station. The rear station is the welding station. There is a transporter between them within the machine. And there are 2 robots welding in the full welding station. It's a very highly productive work cell. This is used for welding on the truck rear axle. You would have seen this part at the rear of the truck connecting the two rear wheels. This is also a truck rear axle welding robot. The robot at the center, and there are two welding stations. This is also a truck rear axle welding, but here the weld profile is an elliptical profile. As I had seen in the previous video, where profiles can be tracked by the robot, this elliptical profile would be tracked and welded by the robot. This is another configuration where the stationary robot is mounted on a pillar instead of on a pedestal, and the part is on a 2-axis robotic manipulator. This is another configuration where there are two robots and there are two fixtures, one in the foreground here and one at the rear here. Both the robots will weld on each fixture while the operator is removing and loading a part from another fixture. These are used for welding brake shoes. As I said that there are a lot of creative and innovative options in robotic configurations. What you are seeing here, you are seeing two welding heads mounted on a single robot wrist. In fact, when the customer came and said that he wants to produce 400 dummy axles per day of 24 hours, we worked out this configuration. There are two such robots on the machine, which means there are totally 4 torches handled by 2 robots, and each torch is doing MIG welding with a 2 mm wire at 600 amperes of current. Normally, MIG welding stops at 1.6 mm wire, but we stretch the limits and we use 2 mm wire, 600 ampere per torch, 2 torches per robot, and 2 such robots on the work cell. That makes it 4 torches, 4 into 600, 2400 amperes of MIG welding simultaneously on one component. And like that, there will be 2 work cells at the front and rear to get the required productivity. You are seeing that actual image here. This is one torch carrying 2 torches, one robot carrying 2 torches. This is the second robot carrying 2 torches. You can see the 4 spools here. This is one work cell and this is another station A and B. So we mask the loading, unloading, clamping and declamping times. We also increase the arcing productivity with 4 torches. This is a hugely productive work cell configured by Primo for our customer. Having seen some images, let us look at a few of the videos of this equipment. This part is called the center frame of an excavator. I had shown it before in the image. All the welds are very highly load-bearing welds. And this part can be tilted and rotated in a 2-axis manipulator. The customer's demand is that we should do the welding in 1G position for all the joints, and we have accordingly configured the part manipulating system also. You would have seen the robot welding on the excavator. Now I'll show you a material handling video. In this video, the robot does the material handling while welding is happening on fixed automatic machines. The robot is serving 4 welding stations. There is an in-feed conveyor and an out-feed conveyor. The robot picks up from the in-feed conveyor, places on any one of the 4 stations and places the welded wheel on the out-feed conveyor. The robots will not come to the welding machine unless the operator presses the button saying that he has moved away. Now let's see another machining application where the robots are used for loading and unloading. I'll stop the videos for a moment. Dr. Murugan, are you in a position to hear me? I saw a message from you that you are waiting to hear me.
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
You are able to hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Let me resume my presentation and videos.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. This video where the robot is used for tending or loading and unloading from 3 machining centers or turning centers. The robot is now waiting with an empty arm here while another wheel is already ready in it. Once the door opens,
your presentation is not visible, I think.
okay, I will share it again. Thanks for telling me, Mr. Prakash. I hope it is visible now. Is it visible now?
Yes, it has started. Yes.
Thank you very much. You can see how continuously the robot is serving the 3 machines. Actually, the wheel moves from one machine to another. And it places the processed wheel onto the outfeed conveyor. As you can see here, it is 1 minute 7 seconds processing time and 53 wheels in 1 hour. Just over a minute per wheel. And 3 operations are happening. I'll now show you another video. All these are to basically expose the various kinds of possibilities that are there with the robot in an automation environment, either for welding or for handling or for combining welding and handling. Now you look at this video, it's a pleasure to watch. Here, this profiled box section is rotated and tilted and positioned by 2 robots while welding is done by another robot. This demonstrates the profile tracking capability of the robot also, and also how complex joints can all be done in 1G position without the need to unload and reposition them. Now that particular taper portion has become parallel to the ground. It's very important to keep the welding requirements in mind when configuring the robotic work cells. Which joints need to be welded in 1G, which have to be welded in single layer. All these need to be considered before configuring a work cell. All these actions are being done to ensure that every joint is in down hand position. And both the robots would now unload the component onto a table in a particular orientation. Can we call this as a completely unmanned work cell? It is practically so. We just have to bring the part through the crane and take the part out by the crane. I will now show you another video wherein the profile of a screw, an extruder screw, is being tracked by the robot. You are seeing an extruder screw here. This is used in a food processing industry machine. The flights are a continuous spiral, and you will see how the robot is tracking this spiral. This is the wire cutting and cleaning station, where the wire, that ball tip of the wire is cut. The gas cup is cleaned to avoid porosity in the welding, and then the robot detects the start point automatically. I had shown about start point detection previously to you, and welding is switched off to give clarity on how the tracking is happening. The robot is tracking a spiral, a continuous spiral. In fact, we also have spirals of varying pitches in one component. It is just hugging to the weld root very intelligently. All the intelligence is hidden. You are only seeing the robot arm tracking the weld root. But a huge amount of data processing is happening to achieve this functionality, because it is not easy to duplicate the welder's brain. These are trials happening in our factory before the machine is shipped to check whether it meets all the customer expectations. The total weld length could be as long as about 5 to 6 meters in one component. The entire 5 to 6 meters would be completely automatically welded by this robot. There are openings in between where we should stop the weld and restart. There are huge possibilities with the robot in any given application. I'm just fast forwarding because the whole idea is to understand the functionalities. Right up to the end. Let's get back to the presentation. So those were on the robotic welding configurations and possibilities and how the robots not only duplicate the welder's arm and wrist but also attempt to duplicate the welder's brain. Now in the second part of this presentation, let us look at Industry 4.0. For some of the people, it could seem to be a disconnected subject. For some of you, you may know the connections already. At the end of this presentation, you will understand what is the connection between Industry 4.0 and this robotic welding automation. The factories of the futures are going to be compliant for Industry 4.0, and these standards are leading us towards them. On the left side column, you are seeing the current technology systems: pneumatic controls, hydraulic controls, electric controls, electronic controls, and robotic controls. And then whatever be the process equipment, could be welding, painting, etc. Now, if you are getting into Industry 4.0, the same machine for the same component should have the red colored bullet points as features in the work cell. Industry 4.0 demands that these functionalities are also built into the work cell. That is where the relevance comes. We will see each of these red colored points in detail as to what exactly they mean. These are the technology pillars of Industry 4.0. As you can see here, the first pillar is simulation and augmented reality. We will understand each of them in the upcoming slides. The second pillar is horizontal and vertical integration. You will understand what is horizontal and what is vertical. The third pillar is industrial IoT, industrial Internet of Things. The fourth pillar is cyber security. Fifth pillar is cloud. Sixth pillar is additive manufacturing. Seventh pillar is supply chain. Eighth pillar is big data analytics. And the ninth pillar is autonomous robot. Subsequently, two more pillars have been added to the Industry 4.0, which are basically artificial intelligence and new businesses. Now let's understand what exactly these pillars mean. You take supply chain. This has already been existing. Without supply chain, processing cannot happen. But here in Industry 4.0, it is completely digitized. It is called DSN, Digital Supply Chain Network. It is completely integrated. When we say integrated, it is end to end. There is a supplier, there is a manufacturer, and there is an end user. We call it a customer. All the three are completely integrated with respect to the supply chain. It is not that somebody gave me raw material, after that he is cut off. I do the processing and send it to my customer. It is not so. It is end to end integrated. It is also integrated multi-directional in the sense that you can also have a reverse flow of information. And you see the another point as real-time data exchange. Whatever is the status at the supply chain's supplier's place is known to the company which does the manufacturing and the end user also. And it is a complete integration from supplier through the manufacturer to the end customer. This is one of the pillars. The second pillar is horizontal and vertical integration. In the horizontal axis, we have got the three people of the suppliers, the manufacturer or the company, and then the user or the customer. The vertical is the individual functions in each of those three horizontals, like your marketing department, design department, procurement department, processing department, installation and commissioning, after sales service, R&D. Those are all in the vertical. Integrating them all is horizontal and vertical integration. Nobody is an island in Industry 4.0. The third pillar of Industry 4.0 is IIoT, or the Industrial Internet of Things. IoT may be a name familiar to most of you here, which is basically sensors and actuators that are communicating in any protocol. Now, the same sensors and actuators used in an industrial environment is IIoT, or the Industrial Internet of Things, and Industry 4.0. One of the third pillar of IIoT is Industry 4.0 is IIoT. So here we are basically connecting the sensor to the cyber physical system. Cyber is virtual, physical is real. Cyber physical is an integration of virtual and real. And it works on the principle of MAA, which is MAA, measure, analyze, and act. Measuring is done by the sensor, which is on site, on the machine. Analysis is happening on the cloud, and acting on the analysis is done either on the on-site machine or onto another third-party environment. And these sensors are basically done to give us various inputs on various machine parameters, as well as giving us human feedback. And IIoT allows machine-to-machine communication and machine-to-human communications. The fourth pillar of Industry 4.0 is an autonomous robot. What is an autonomous robot? In the previous slides, in one of the slides, I had shown a video of a laser cut profiled plate being welded. There is nobody who does the programming of the robot, nobody who does the path teaching. The robot goes to the part, it understands what is to be done. This is one level of autonomous, we call it semi-autonomous. The Industry 4.0 talks of fully autonomous robots. Robots that work independently with its own sensors. They know what to do, when to do, and where to do. And interconnectivity and interoperability between the robots. Here also we have the machine-to-machine and machine-to-human communication. And cobot, which is the latest thing happening on the robotic environment, where the robots are used as a tool by the humans. They don't replace the humans. They work along with the humans. Generally, you would have seen that robotic work cells are fenced, as you would have seen in the various pictures and videos. And the whole idea is to ensure that the humans do not enter the robot working environment. There are light curtains, which would sense a person walking in or a person's hand entering the working area. It would automatically stop the robots in a normal robotic cell. In a collaborative robot, It is opposite of it. The robots work along with the human. The cobots also come under the category of autonomous robots as the fourth pillar in Industry 4.0. The fifth pillar is simulation and augmented reality. Here we are basically trying to integrate the virtual world and the physical world together using 3D simulation. And augmented reality is combining VR, which is virtual reality, and the physical reality. VR is something that we would have all seen in the entertainment world. We put certain glasses in our head and we sit in a seat, and let us say that we are watching a movie through the glasses, the VR glasses. And in the movie, if there is a jumpy road in which a vehicle is traveling, the seat in which we are sitting will also be jumping physically. They are integrated. This is what we call by augmented reality, combining virtual reality and the real world. This is the fifth pillar of Industry 4.0. The sixth pillar is additive manufacturing. Manufacturing traditionally has been a reduction process or a metal removal process, right? We take a larger raw material and then we remove whatever we don't need to get what we need. It is like sculpting a particular sculpture out of a solid rock. That's what we normally do. But additive manufacturing is the opposite of it. You create what you want. You don't create by removing, but you create by adding what you want. So if you give a 3D design to the equipment, let us say a robot, the robot would create a particular shape or an object. What we traditionally call as 3D printing gets into manufacturing in a shop floor environment. That's Industry 4.0. The sixth pillar is 3D printing in industry for real world manufacturing. The seventh pillar is cyber security. These are names that we would hear only in the IT department of an institution or a factory, right? We don't bother about cyber security on the shop floor, but Industry 4.0 says cyber security is one of the pillars of Industry 4.0. The reason is it's a completely connected environment. Let us take a machine. The machine has got lots of sensors in it. Those sensors are always communicating to the cloud. The cloud does the processing and the cloud initiates action based on the process or the analysis. Now, let us imagine a situation that somebody hacks the information that is going from the sensors or the decisions that are coming after the analysis. If so, a machine could be made to perform a false operation. There are safety issues, there are damages. So cyber security is one of the essential requirements and is the seventh pillar of Industry 4.0. In other words, if somebody is taking Industry 4.0 as a career objective, he not only needs to know about robots or programming or automation, he also needs to know IT. Or somebody who has IT knowledge gets into Industry 4.0, he should also know the other side of it. The eighth pillar of Industry 4.0 is the cloud, where we do the receipt of data, storage of data, and if required, analysis of data. These are on-demand networks, which basically means that they are always available and we use them as and when we require. And it is shared by multiple requirements, multiple resources. Big data analytics is basically processing of a huge amount of data. It is like how the Google Maps works. They keep collecting a huge amount of data of the traffic and then they analyze it and compute the amount of time required to go from one place to another place or alternative routes to be taken. You can just visualize the amount of data that has to be analyzed to just give us an alternate route. Over a distance of, let's say, 10 kilometers, it has to calculate the vehicle flow dynamically based on our existing speed and tell us how much time we will need to reach the destination, and if there is a traffic hold up, what is the time required in the alternative route, and then suggest it. That kind of big data analytics gets into the industry shop floor environment. That's what we are discussing here. You visualize so many machines in a factory which are all Industry 4.0 compliant, and multiple such factories, all of them accessing the cloud, pushing data from the sensors into them and expecting decisions from them. That's big data analytics on the shop floor, ninth pillar of Industry 4.0. If you look at the roles and responsibilities of the Industry 4.0 environment as against the current environment, let us take the first area of operations. Invariably, it is firefighting, right? We are always reacting. It is not a process the response, it is a reaction. Something has stopped, something has happened, so we go and do something, some bearing has broken. We know after the bearing is broken. We don't know that the bearing is going to break. So we do firefighting. All data is manual. In this particular machine, I have replaced the spindle bearing every 2 years. So let me replace every 2 years. There is a manual data. It is not the present condition of the bearing, present temperature of the bearing, present noise levels. It is not data based, it is manual based. As I said, reactive problem solving, manual recording, and people dependent. If you come to the Industry 4.0 environment, it is all data driven, big data analysis and automatic analysis. And the data is pulled from the machine into the cloud. The sensors data is getting pulled into the cloud for processing. And proactive problem solving, because we know with the data that the problem is going to come with so and so time or period. And autonomous machineries, meaning that they don't depend on the humans. Similarly, if you talk of IT department, IT used to be a department confined to computers, the air-conditioned environment of the ADP rooms, and working with the cloud. No more so in the Industry 4.0. IT department has to know the operations of the equipments. They should have expertise of the in-house activities, not just IT activities. They should have the knowledge of cloud and IIoT integration, and they should work with the system integrator or have the knowledge of a system integrator. If you're looking at common functions, what you need to do in the Industry 4.0 environment, need to know is to have the knowledge of multiple functions. Cross-functional knowledge is required. We have already seen that the IT person should have a shop floor knowledge and the shop floor person should have the IT knowledge. You must be thorough with the operations of the equipment, about the way the whole thing is integrated, how the electronics plays a role there. And reporting is all automatic. There is no manual or human dependent reporting on documentation. And coming to the management of the whole environment, it is not objective management, it is not discretionary management, it is data-based management. It is not on-site management, it is not leading from the front. The management is virtual, but very visible. And no more micromanagement on the floor, that organizing for the material, checking on a rework, it is all smart management because the data is there, available all the time to all the people. And instead of being people dependent, it is data dependent. This is what Industry 4.0's revised roles will be. And people who are looking at a career in the Industry 4.0 environment can be aware of what is expected out of them. It's a very interesting and a very challenging transition. Now coming to the close of the presentation, let us look at a work cell that we are right now building. In fact, this whole work cell was designed during the COVID-19 period. It incorporates many of the 9 pillars of Industry 4.0. It is also a very high-end multi-robot, multi-manipulator work cell with mechanized material handling. It's a pipe fabrication work cell. Gentlemen, what you are seeing is a simulation. At the design level, It's a 3D simulation where we are bringing one of the pillars of internet for industry 4.0 you would have seen is 3D simulation, where we are trying to merge the virtual reality and the physical reality. These are 12-meter long pipes. There are two flanges to be welded. We clamp the two ends. The operators place the manual couplings and tack weld them. Now the pipes are getting assembled in the station 1. These are laser scanning to ensure that the orientation between the coupling and the flanges are automatically maintained. It does the tack welding. The pipes move automatically to the second station where there are two robots. There is a laser scanning of the coupling position, laser scanning of the weld joint, what we have seen as start point detection in the previous slides, and then the robots perform the welding of the flanges. Now it scans the coupling to weld the coupling here. The robot then goes to the second coupling, scans it. You will see it scans in 2 axes and then decides where the coupling is and then performs the welding. Now the pipe rolls down to the third station. In the third station, some more brackets are placed on the pipe. There are 4 robots in the third station. It scans for the bracket, picks up the brackets, slides along the 12-meter length, places the bracket, while another robot will come and do the tack welding. The pipe turns by 180 degree. Another bracket is placed and welded. What you are seeing is a 3D simulation wherein we merge the virtual and the physical. This whole system is designed to roll out one pipe every 5 minutes. There are 8 brackets, 8 couplings, and 2 flanges to be placed and welded. After it is done, the pipe gets unloaded onto a unloading ramp after finishing the rest of the coupling. There are a lot of laser sensors and scanners and part sensors. They all communicate, and all the robots are Industry 4.0 compliant. The output of this machine is known to the customer continuously as the production happens. There's no need for somebody to note down and write a logbook and send a mail. This cell should be ready in our factory probably in another 2 months from now. It's under manufacturing. Gentlemen, coming to the close of the presentation, I hope the time that you all have invested for this session was useful to you. Thank you very much. I now stop this screen sharing and over to you, Dr. Murugan.
Thank you very much, sir. Really, I'm really surprised to see such a wonderful setup you have, really. So in Belgium also last year I visited industries like robot industry, especially welding. So I could see such a huge components there. So really, I saw your industry during 96, 98. So now you have done a lot of work in robotic welding, especially. So really, not on the state of art, you are using it. Really, I appreciate, sir. So a lot of things we have to learn from you, especially teaching paternity, really welding paternity. Okay, sir. Really, I appreciate. I thank for your valuable time and sharing the latest technology, latest work, especially robotic welding to participants. Really, they are. They are actually they will be benefited by this, sir. So I really thank you very much for the on behalf of all of participants and our department, our college, and Atal AICTE. Thank you, sir. Really wonderfully, you have done it. Wonderful presentation, sir. So I now request the audience participants to ask questions. Some questions were there in the chat. I can, sir, you can read it and answer, or I can read also.
I am just going through the chat now.
Yes, sir. So here, so one Chintan Baril Bala. Yes, so feel really practical. So yes, a very informative presentation he has told. And one question is, I just ask them. Mr. Father Andrew has asked synchronization of movements between torch and joint. He was asking to explain, sir. Synchronization of movements, especially when you are welding that profiled plate with that. I think so.
Yes. See, there is a laser scanner fitted ahead of the torch, and the scanner keeps looking for the break in the plate surface. So as the robot progresses along the length of the welding, the laser scanner keeps communicating the coordinates of the break in the joint continuously to the robot, and the robot processes that information and decides on the position that it needs to take up. It is an integration of the laser sensor, which is a look ahead sensor, and then the robot. And the distance between the laser sensor and the robot we call as the pitch. If you enter into the touch screen on the equipment, the robot will know that it has to act on the particular feedback after a certain amount of time based on the welding speed. Let us say there is a gap of 75 millimeter between the arc sensor, the laser sensor, and the welding torch. Then all the feedbacks from the robot sensor will be acted upon after 75 mm of travel, and all of them would happen dynamically and automatically.
Thank you, sir. One more question he has asked, and your executive engineer has answered. Mr.
Yeah.
Prakash Krishnamurthy has answered his question.
Yeah.
Actually, he asked, how is the intelligence behind the movement of robo and weld torch happening? Is it only through a coded program? He asked, and your engineer, your executive has answered it. Mr. Prakash Krishnamurthy has answered it. Okay,
Yeah.
and in the chat it is available. And
Yes,
another,
I have just seen that. Yes.
the Chintan Barelwala, He has asked, is it MIG welding in ABB, sir?
Yes, it is MIG welding.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Okay, Syed Karimullah, he has answered. So just thanks for valuable lecture, excellent presentation by comment by Andre, and okay, very informative presentation, excellent presentation. Okay, any other questions? You can directly ask him. You can unmute and you can ask him, please. Is a valuable time he's spending any presentation.
There is a question from one Mr. Anil, which says that can we adapt or change or write the program accordingly if the pipe is of a different shape, maybe a square shape? Definitely possible, Mr. Anil. We can have two options. One is we can do it as an offline activity, as you have written as write the program, or it can even be done dynamically through adaptive. Both are possible depending upon the investments and the requirements, but very much possible to do on shapes other than circular pipes also.
Sir, I would like to ask you, sir, suppose
Yes,
if the gas is going to be consumed fully, so is
Yeah.
there any indication like IoT? Will it you get information, sir?
Very much there. In fact, we don't use normal solenoids or flow meters in this environment.
Yes, sir.
We use mass flow controllers,
Yes, sir.
which can be programmed for the desired flow rate and also give a continuous feedback on the actual flow rate.
Okay, sir.
So it is not necessarily the gas getting empty. Even if the gas flow comes down due to a leakage in some hose or something, the machine would know, generate an alarm, and we can give a decision on whether to stop immediately or to finish that particular part and stop at the end of it. It is very much possible. The machine is fitted with mass flow sensors.
Okay, sir. Are you involving any machine learning algorithms or things also in this, sir?
Prakash, can you answer this query to Dr. Murugan?
Pardon, sir? Can you come again?
Machine learning, sir. Did you? That's why this generally it will run automatically the profile. I think it is by machine learning only. Am I right?
Exactly, because in one of the video, the laser sensor is acting like a receiving device, and then it learns the path and then tells the robot the exact path or the program in which it has to act. So machine learning is always incorporatable.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
In fact, it is one step towards autonomous robots, Dr. Murugan.
Yes, sir. Really. So collaborative robot, you are really using all types of robots, and you are really reducing the time, cycle time, everything, sir. Really wonderful work you have done, sir. You are dedicated. You are 25 years of this. So after this, I could see excellent work. Really, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Really.
Thank you, Dr. Murugan.
Any questions from audience, please? Andrew is asking, is it possible to visit your firm?
Very much possible. You are always welcome. And you can contact us. Our website is www.primoautomation.com. We have a live chat also on the website. You can inform us and come to our factory.
If there is no question, okay, then on behalf of our PhD College of Technology, Department of Robotics and Automation Engineering and Center of Excellence in Welding Engineering Technology, I thank MD Sir Mr. Rajagopal Sir and his colleague Mr. Krishnamurthy for spending their time really. So it is a great experience for the participants, so that they can really do a lot of things in this robotic welding, learning various algorithms, all these things, sensors. So really, it is very useful. Once again, I thank Mr. Rajagopal and his team, Mr. Krishnamurthy, and thank all the participants. Thank you very much.